Hi folks, welcome to Great Books, Big Ideas. I'm Jim, and this is Alfie, my Boston Terrier, my old fella here. He's gonna get settled into the couch here and make his bed while I update you with some recently finished books and books I'm currently reading. I want to focus mainly today on this book, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I just finished it 2 days ago, I think, and really liked it a lot. So big thumbs up on it. Let me tell you a bit about this book. It's a dystopian novel. Octavia Butler, a sci-fi fantasy author. Here is her picture. This was published in the early 90s, I believe, and about 5-6 years before Octavia Butler passed away. And it's part of a series. The second one is called Parable of the Talents. And I believe there was a third volume that was projected, but she didn't finish it. That's a shame, because this is a terrific read. It's a dystopian novel, sort of climate fiction, a world gone to hell. And it's about a protagonist, 15-year-old Lauren Olamina, who lives in a gated community outside of Los Angeles. And basically the world is very messed up. There's not enough water around, resources are scarce, infrastructure is crumbling, and it's a big mess. There's crime, there's drug addicts crawling all over the place. And what drives the plot of this novel, there will be some spoilers in here, just fair warning. If you don't want spoilers, skip ahead to later in the video when I get to the reading updates. But basically, this gated community gets overrun. Lauren loses her family members. We presume her father has died. Other siblings and friends and family are confirmed dead. And it just gets overrun, burned up, and she is forced to flee and joins up with a few survivors. And essentially the plot then becomes an adventure story, a survival story, as they begin to walk north up through the state of California, headed towards the Pacific Northwest to find a more stable, secure place to live, where there's more water available, there's more resources, you can actually find a paying job, and so on and so forth. And it's a harrowing journey. I mean, there are people always at war with one another, gunfire, rapes, murders, robberies. It's a dog-eat-dog world that she depicts, and along the way she kind of brings more and more people into her circle. This character is very much an empath, has such special ability where she feels the emotions, the pain of other people. So if she is defending herself and, for instance, is forced to shoot someone or stab someone, she too will feel that pain until that person dies. So that's a kind of a interesting facet of the book. But thematically, this is more than just a survival tale. It's about the seeds of a new religion that Lauren is basically creating. It's called Earthseed. And the different chapters in the book, they read like journal entries, like things she's writing in her notebook. They all start with something that she's writing on this kind of Earthseed religion that she's essentially founding, and it's founded on a conception of God that is based on change. And in a minute, I'm going to quote some selections from an interview with Octavia Butler, and she can explain it better than I can. But that was very, very interesting. Now, I've said this before on this channel as I've been updating my progress through this book. I'm I mean, I like sci-fi, fantasy, climate fiction, all that, but I'm by no means like super well read in the genres. But the one book that this did remind me of was part 2 of Margaret Atwood's Madame trilogy, which is a highly recommended trilogy. I liked Oryx and Crake the best. The Year of the Flood is number 2, and then I think it's just called Madame is part 3. And I liked them in that order. Like Oryx and Crake was a terrific book. Year of the Flood was very, very good and sort of filled in some new aspects of the story world that Atwood is describing there. And then part 3, the Madame, is sort of tying up loose ends. But the Year of the Flood, part 2, is the one that reminded me of this book, because both novels are about the world gone to hell. In the Oryx and Crake world, Madame, it's basically a human-generated pandemic that has wiped out most of humanity. And then there are survivors. And there's also a new race of humanoid creatures that have been basically like created in the lab that have now been like, they're like now out in the wild surviving too. There's a lot more to it. I can't get into it. But part 2 of that trilogy is about another sort of band of survivors, a female protagonist. And there's also this sort of new religion that's starting up, which also has like little excerpts similar to this book of, sayings from their, quote, Bible of this like cult or this religious offshoot group that's just trying to like make sense of the world and get back to the land and survive and so forth. So there's some parallels there that are interesting to compare. I wonder if anyone else has done that. And I'm not sure of the dates of when Year of the Flood came out compared to this, but I'm pretty sure they were right around the same time period. I'm not sure which came first, but anyway, there are definite echoes there. Of the two, I think I prefer this one even more, because as harrowing as this story is, and it does get dark. I mean, the violence, there's even some cannibalism in there. It makes for tough reading at times. And eventually, Lauren hooks up with this older gentleman who has a beard, and they fall in love, and he's part of the group. And all these people are survivors. They've fled like awful circumstances. And there's maybe about 6, 7, 8, 10, a dozen of these by the end of the book who have banded together. Well, that guy who used to be a doctor, he has bought some property in like Northern California, sort of north of the Bay Area, I think. And his sister is living there, and there's like a little homestead, and he has sort of purchased this area, this land in advance with the possibility that he might have to escape there. And he convinces Lauren, and then she convinces the others that like let's go head over there and see what that's all about. Well, by the time they get there, we find out that homestead has been destroyed, burnt to the ground. Everyone's dead, and then they have to decide. Do we stay here in California? Do we keep going? And they come to an agreement that they're going to basically build a new homestead, a new community built around this earthseed religion that she's cultivated. And as horrible as the book's plot goes, there is a definite hint of hopefulness at the end, like this is some kind of new beginning where people are so desperate that they're going to like latch on to this religion and build something new out of it. So let me read a little bit from this reading group guide, this particular edition, which I found in a little free library, which says, who published this book? Grand Central Publishing. Okay. published by arrangement with Seven Stories Press. Hachette group. Anyway, there's a reading group guide. I love when books have these, and there's actually lists of discussion questions at the end. But there's a conversation, so there's some interview questions with Octavia Butler. So let me read a little bit in her own words what she was thinking of. She talks about where the Earthseed religion came from. And she says, first, I had a great deal of trouble beginning Parable of the Sower. I knew that I wanted to tell the story of Lauren Olamina, who begins a new religion and who sometime after her death, after people have had time to forget how human she was, might easily be considered a god. I wanted her to be an intelligent, believable person. I didn't want to write satire, which makes me think of the Margaret Atwood, because the whole Oryx and Crake Menadem trilogy, I felt like had more satire in it than this book did. So that's interesting. I think that came across. This does not read like satire. I didn't want to write about a hypocrite or a fool. I wanted her to believe deeply in what she taught, and I wanted her teachings to be reasonable, intellectually respectable. I put Earthseed together by asking myself questions and coming up with answers. And she says a little bit later, what one thing could we not stop no matter how hard we tried? The answer I came up with after some thought was change. We can do a lot of things to influence the ongoing process of change. We can focus them, alter their speed of impact. In general, we can shape change, but we can't stop it no matter how hard we try. Throughout the universe, the ongoing reality is change. I'm wondering if Octavia Butler was a fan of Ovid's Metamorphoses. That was the first book that I came up with on the theme of change. So she says, that's where I began. I was a bit disconcerted when I read about other religions and was reminded that in Buddhism, change was also very important, although in a different way. To put it simply, in Buddhism, since everything is ephemeral, we can avoid suffering only by avoiding attachment, because all things to which we might become attached are bound to pass away. But Lauren Olamina says that since change is the one inescapable truth, change is the basic clay of our lives. In order to live constructive lives, we must learn to shape change when we can and yield to it when we must. Either way, we must learn and teach, adapt, and grow. So change is the God of the Earthseed religion. She also talks about how her physical model for the character's religious book that she's writing was the Tao Te Ching, or Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. So there's some Taoist influence on here as well. And there's Christianity, because Lauren was raised as a Baptist, so it's kind of this hybrid religion that she's kind of creating on her own time. Now, there's one more question I want to address from this conversation text. The interviewer says, you called Parable of the Sower a cautionary tale, but because the future presented in Sower is alarming but possible. Do you have other ideas about the future that didn't make it into the book? And she says, the idea in Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents is to consider a possible future unaffected by parapsychological abilities such as telepathy or telekinesis, unaffected by alien intervention, unaffected by magic. It is to look at where we are now, what we are doing now, and to consider where some of our current behaviors and unintended problems might take us. So remember, she wrote this in the 90s, so now we're living in her future. So compare what she was saying back then to where we are today. I considered drugs and the effects of drugs on the children of drug addicts. I looked at the growing rich-poor gap, at throwaway labor, at our willingness to build and fill prisons, our reluctance to build and repair schools and libraries, and at our assault on the environment. In particular, I looked at global warming and the ways in which it's likely to change things for us. There's food price-driven inflation. That's likely because as the climate changes, some of the foods we're used to won't grow as well in the places we're used to growing them. Not only will temperatures be too high, not only will there be not enough water, but the increase in carbon dioxide won't affect all plants in the same ways. Some will grow a little faster, while their weeds grow a lot faster. Some will grow faster but not be as nutritious, forcing both their beasts and us to need more to be decently nourished. It's a much more complex problem than a simple increase in temperature. I considered spreading hunger as a reason for increased vulnerability to disease, and there would be less money for inoculations or treatment. Also, thanks to rising temperatures, tropical diseases like malaria and dengue would move north. I considered loss of coastline as the level of the sea rises. I imagined the United States becoming slowly, through the combined effects of lack of foresight and short-term unenlightened self-interest, a third world country. Okay, so yeah, so basically in other books that she's written, and this is my first Octavia Butler book, but it won't be the last, she does write more in like a fantasy sci-fi realm, but in this one there was more kind of closer to home, trying to just look at like these sort of natural forces, social forces that were combining to create a pretty bleak near future scenario. So yeah, that's pretty good. If you can find this edition in a used bookshop, I don't know if it's still in print in this edition with the discussion guide, I recommend getting that. Let me see if there's any good questions. Well, here's one discussion question for those of you who have read Parable of the Sower. And I think it's a timely question. And it goes like this. The near future of Parable of the Sower reflects an America steeped in chaos with relentless poverty and lawlessness. Education is no longer guaranteed for everyone, and violence is rampant. The author has said that she came to this vision of the future by imagining our current woes progressing unchecked to their logical ends. Do you agree or disagree that this is a possible future for America? In terms of government and social stability, societal stability, as well as future technological advancements, in what ways do you believe America will change in the next 2 decades? Do you think things will be better or worse than they are now? So yeah, food for thought. Let me know in the comments if you have any reactions, if you've read Parable of the Sower and you have thoughts about that, or just if you have thoughts about America's future or the world's future on those points. Highly recommended. This one was found in the Little Free Library, and it's going to go back to the Little Free Library because I want someone else to discover this and I want to pass it on. But I would love to read the next one, Parable of the Talents. And then I know, my daughter has read 2 or 3 Octavia Butler books, and we have those sitting around the house. And I will, in the near future, at some point, maybe next year, move on to another Octavia Butler book. Also, she's in Library of America. I don't think this book is, but a couple of her novels and some stories, they have I think there's 1 volume available of Octavia Butler. If there's one, there's probably going to be another one on the way. Clearly, one of our best sci-fi fantasy, sort of dystopian fiction types of authors in recent American literature. Okay, moving on. Reading updates. So I did finish the James Thurber, My Life and Hard Times. This was an easy read. I wouldn't say it was like, it didn't really blow me away. It's written as kind of like sketches. They're humorous. They're kind of fun. It might not be like the right time and right place for me. And it's a very slight volume. So it's more like a sampler, a little taste of James Thurber. But I do have at least two other fuller volumes of James Thurber that were my father's copies. One is The Years with Ross, and the other, I think it's called the Thurber album or something like that. But anyway, they're around, they're waiting to be read. And this just gave me a nice sort of taste of his style. And I'll come back to Thurber for sure. So anyway, this one's going to go back to a little free library as well. I finished Soren Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, which, was not an easy read at all, but I wanted to prepare myself to work on this little fiction chapter thing, and I had success with that. So my latest story on my Substack reflects part of what I got out of this book. The Night of Infinite Resignation, The Night of Faith, the Abraham Isaac story, all found its way into that. But I'm really glad I reread this. This is a keeper. I'll come back to it. These ideas really intrigue me and fascinate me. And there's more in this deep well, more water to get out of it at some point when I get a little smarter and better read. That has led me back to a little more philosophy. So in my Aristotle, Volume 1 from Great Books of the Western World, I am continuing to slog through metaphysics, but I'm getting through it. I think if I maybe read every night a little bit more of it, I might get through the rest of metaphysics within this week. And then after that, this volume finishes with shorter works by Aristotle. Next up after metaphysics would be On the Soul, and then short physical treatises such as On Sense and the Sensible, On Memory and Reminiscence, On Sleep and Sleeplessness, On Dreams, On Prophesying by Dreams, On Longevity and Shortness of Life, On Youth and Old Age, On Life and Death. All very, very interesting topics, and those are much shorter. So my hope is, I'm going to be optimistic, that if I finish this by Thanksgiving, the metaphysics, which is really, really hard reading, and I don't, I just get about that much of it. But I'm exposing myself to it, sponging up what I can. If I get through that, maybe I'll read all the rest of them and finish this whole volume by the end of the year. Like that's a goal to strive for. Also, I want to get one other book. It's in the other room to show you another book I started. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. This is a new pickup, another one that cut the line that I began reading, and I have my reasons for it. It's John Ruskin, Unto This Last and Other Writings in a Penguin Classics edition. I think I got this at a library sale a month or two ago, and I've started reading it. It's good. Read the long introduction to it, edited it with an introduction and notes by Clive Wilmer. The reason I picked this up is, well, first of all, John Ruskin was a Victorian British writer, art critic, and much more than that. He was one of the first champions of the painting of John Turner, and very influential art and architecture critic, and widely recognized as one of the premier prose stylists of the Victorian period. So I was familiar with his name. I might have read like a little sample of him in an anthology in like a British Lit Survey course. But other than that, not much exposure to John Ruskin at all, other than being familiar with the name. And the reason I picked this up was because Marcel Proust was a big Ruskin fan. And I'm planning to reread Proust in the new translations next year, starting in January. So I thought to prime myself for that and to maybe just kind of like get in the mood, I wanted to read a nice dose of John Ruskin, see what he's all about, and try to think why he might have been so influential on Proust. So that was the method there. And I'm I'm currently have read only this like fairy tale that he wrote, The King of the Golden River, which was quite good. And now I'm into a piece called The Nature of Gothic, where he's talking about Gothic art and architecture. And the centerpiece of this is going to be the book Unto This Last, which is where Ruskin moves from like art criticism to talking more about political economy. And he has some very strong critiques on this. And based on the introduction I read, John Ruskin was a Tory, very conservative. But when he turned to this sort of critique of political economy, he became a lot more palatable to the socialists. And he started to be seen as like a fellow traveler of that movement. So that is really interesting, how, what we regard as liberal and conservative and socialist like today isn't exactly the way they saw it in Victorian times. So these things change. So I want to read more of that. And I guess Unto This Last is regarded as one of his major works. A lot of John Ruskin, I think, is out of print, but you can find him in online editions. And I grabbed a couple things for my Kobo reader to look at. So this is a new one that I'm reading. It's kind of interesting so far, but I'm really just getting started with it. I also have been reading a few chapters in Redwall by Brian Jacques. The more chapters I read, the more I'm getting into the story. So this is good escapist fiction, enjoying that. I also read one or two more stories in my Borges collected fictions. So I read The Shape of the Sword and The Theme of the Traitor and the Hero, Funes, His Memory. And these are kind of maybe lesser works by him, but there's always something interesting in Borges's fiction. Like he's really intellectually, he's like really fun to read, good entertainment, food for thought. So I want to make a bigger push on that soon. And this was an oldie that I like went back to, and I'm just reading like little bits and pieces of it because I think the Kierkegaard got me back into philosophical mode. The World is Will and Idea by Arthur Shopenhauer. This is not for the faint of heart either. And I'm only like that far into it. But again, in small doses, it passes the time. And I think just based on what I know about Schopenhauer, he's regarded as this like super pessimistic philosopher, and I guess that's true. And I don't consider myself that much of a pessimist, but I think based on what I know of his philosophy, we're sort of in the same mindset, a similar mindset. So I wanted to give myself a chance to read like a lot more of his work before I see how allied I am with his way of seeing the world. But not much to say about this yet. That's just kind of back on the burner. And on the Kobo reader, Finnegan's Wake's still going on, that is what it is. And I'm reading another John Ruskin work that I think Proust really loved. It's like his memoirs. It's called Praeterita, something like that. And I found a free ebook edition. I realized that on my Kobo reader that they have a beta feature in here where it has a little web browser built in. So what I did as an experiment is I went on to, it was either Project Gutenberg or I think it might have been archive.org. And I found some John Ruskin that I could download. And I just wanted to see if it would work. And you could download the EPUBs. And basically it works. I mean, there's a lot of typographical errors in some of these online freely available texts, but it's readable enough that if you really want to read something, that's an option. So it was really, because I looked in my online library here, like through my public library, and they didn't have any Ruskin. So that was the next resort. But yeah, discovered that has a nice new feature to it. See if your ebook reader has that option where you can actually get online. Then you don't even have to sideload it over the USB connection, which I did. I mean, I have a whole bunch of books that I've gathered over the years. And earlier in the week, I connected it up with the USB cable, and I added a few more volumes of things that I might want to read. There's like probably a couple thousand books in here. Like, it's amazing what technology can do. Like, you have a whole library right in the palm of your hand, but it's still not as much fun as reading paper books. So anyway, that's the reading update. Let me know what you all have been reading, or if you have any reactions to, Octavia Butler or any of these other books I've read. Let me know in the comments. Thanks for spending some time with me. If you're watching this in real time, it's Friday, so we're heading into the weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks.